Well, these are the kind of people that are in our federal institutions. And I say with no hubris whatsoever, I have done something that I dare say 90% of people in this chamber have not done. And that is I have visited over 24 prisons in this country. And I have to tell you, I was surprised when I walked into my first federal institution almost 2 years ago. I had never been in a federal prison before. And what I found was that, in terms of the population, there is no monolithic population. Our prisons are not filled with 100% bad, scary, evil people. There are some people like that in there. It's probably, I would say, between 10 and 20% of people in federal prison, that's exactly where they should be at all times, and the public needs to be protected from those people. But after that, here's the truth. The truth is that the population in prisons after that is on a continuum and on a gradient. And you have every single type of person in that prison. You have people who are illiterate, people who have brain damage, people who are low intelligence, people who suffer from FASD, people who have had traumatic events that happen to them, people that are in prison because of their addictions and their mental health. I went into the RPC in Saskatoon about a month ago, and I asked the people that work in that prison, this is not the prisoners, I asked the people that work there, what percentage of the people in that institution committed crimes that are directly related to their addiction? The answer I got was 70%. So these are people that are in a bar, they get drunk, they get in a fight, something happens. This is what happens. Now, I'm not excusing any of that. Any kind of breach of the criminal law is wrong, and it needs to be dealt with, and dealt with appropriately. The question I ask is, when those people are in prison, what is the best way to make sure when they come out that they don't do that again? Because that's what I want, and it's what the people of Canada want. I certainly know it's what the people of Vancouver Kingsway want. They want to be safe. They want to know that when they walk in the streets, or when they're walking in that bar on a Saturday night, or they're walking in their stores, or they're in their parks, or in their schools, that they're safe. That means that those people that come out of prison, and 96% of people that enter federal institutions come out, that those people are not going to hurt them. So what we do know is this, is that simply locking them up for longer and harsher circumstances will not work on the vast majority of these people. So I'm not saying this because of morality or because of compassion. I'm saying this from pure, cold-hearted logic. It doesn't work. That's what I'll go back to. If this government can produce studies that show where these policies have worked, I'd be very interested in seeing those studies and having my attitudes adjusted accordingly. They can't do that. Now, this bill does a number of things. This bill, it makes it harder for people to get parole. It extends the length of time that offenders convicted of offenses have to serve. In other words, it keeps people in jail for longer. It requires the active participation of offenders in attaining the objectives of their correctional plan, and that's part of their release plan, and that's a good thing. Except for, it also changes fundamentally two things in our prison system. It says that the historic standard as established by our Supreme Court of Canada is that when citizens enter our prisons, they lose some important rights. They lose their right to liberty. They lose their right to be in society. And that is a profound loss. But they retain every other right that all Canadians do. That's why people can still vote in prisons. That's why people can still, they have a right not to be tortured. That's why people have a right to health care. Because as Canadian citizens, the Supreme Court of Canada said, when you walk into prison, you don't stop being a citizen. We will punish you severely. We will take away your liberty. But those other rights, you don't lose. And that's a hallmark of a modern, advanced, mature, democratic state. And what this bill would do would alter that. And the second thing that it would do, which I think is extremely concerning, is that it changes the approach to prisoners to allow our correction services system to take whatever measures they think are appropriate to deal with prisoners, as opposed to the least restrictive measures to accomplish the goal. And what that means is this. Just like with our children, it means that when a person abrogates a rule, or if they misbehave, you take the least possible measure that is necessary to change the behavior, not the most extensive one. And this bill would change that. Now, of course, this is because I think this government is proceeding on what I think is a flawed basis. They're proceeding on what's called a roadmap that was authored in 2007 by Rob Sampson, who was the Minister of Privatization under Mike Harris, Conservative government in Ontario, where he was a Minister of Corrections, where, by the way, he advocated strongly for the privatization of Ontario's prison system. That's like putting a fox in charge of a hen house, Mr. Speaker. Now, the roadmap does not engage in a careful, evidence-based review of Canada's correctional system. It cherry-picked statistics to give a distorted view of crime trends. It ignored the history of our prison system. It ignored the jurisprudence that provides the judicial context to imprisoning Canadians. And it was designed to tell the government exactly what they wanted to hear. It was written in haste. It was done in under 6 months from start to finish. And it did not hear from all of the stakeholders that we would want, that Canadians would want to have input if we're making sure that all voices that have experience in the prison system would want to be brought to bear on this. And interesting, one thing this bill does that I think is good is it allows victims to have enshrined in law the right to have input into parole hearings. Now, I just say let's take that one step further. If it's good to have victims have input into parole hearings because we want to have their voice reflected, isn't it important that we have the voices of all stakeholders into determining prison policy in this country? Well, this government didn't do that with the roadmap, and I think that's a flaw. Now, I want to tell a little story because this is not just about statistics and about philosophy. We had before the Public Safety Committee a number of witnesses who testified when we were studying the provision of mental health and addiction services. And we had a young woman named Amber Christie, who was a young woman who had been imprisoned many times, 30 times. And I want to quote what she said. She said, "As I sat and reviewed the documentary footage made of Ashley Smith's time in prison, I couldn't help but find myself being able to identify with her. I myself have been in prison 30 times. Of those 30 times, 29 of them were spent either all in segregation or the majority of time in segregation. I can identify completely with the desperate need to have human contact and the loneliness and isolation that you feel when you're locked in a cell with nothing to do all day. I remember I would look forward to meals because I could read the labels of my drink containers over and over and over again. I was not segregated because of behavior issues or security issues, but because I was withdrawing from heroin. I was still unable to have anything in my cell to help me stay occupied, such as a book or a pen or paper. I looked forward to count time, when the guard would come and count us, and hopefully we'd have a nice guard to sometimes tell us how their day was. It was human contact. I will pause here to state that this description is all too accurate for too many people in our correction system suffering from mental illness and addiction. These are the conditions that the government wants to move us closer towards, and it will do absolutely nothing to make our communities safer. In fact, this approach will make us less safe, as is evidenced by the 29 repeat visits of Amber made to prisons before she got the help that she needed. And here's what she had to say about the conditions in prison that finally allowed her to break free of that cycle of recidivism. She said, "I continued to go through those revolving doors until my last day in corrections in 2005. For the first time, I was sent to Alouette Correctional Centre for Women. For the first time, I was not segregated. This happened to be the first time that I was checked into health care, and to my amazement, I was sent to a unit, not an isolation cell. From there, I got a job in the institution. It was a work camp. I reconnected with family outside of prison. I had the help of a wonderful doctor. I received health care, something I rarely encountered in other prisons. There was a program that was happening all around me that was hard to go unnoticed. There were babies in that prison. This was a prison being run that was more like a rehabilitation center. It was amazing. Not only was there a library and a gym, there was a native elder to talk to. There was drumming and dancing every Tuesday night. As a mother myself, I have to say it helped me to remember the things I was giving up. And I know the other inmates dealt with their problems because of these conditions. I was released in October of 2005. I've not been back since. This prison changed my life. I'd been in many prisons before, but this prison treated me like I was a person and not a number." That, Mr. Speaker, speaks louder than anything else I can say. Thank you.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires.